Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The smell hit me first. Not the usual diesel and rust you'd expect on a river barge, but something older, like wet earth mixed with copper pennies. My grandfather used to tell me that smell meant the river was hungry. I thought he was just trying to scare me. I was wrong. If you're listening to this right now, comfortable in your bed, maybe with the lights dimmed low, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to tell you isn't just a story. It's a warning. And by the time I'm done, you'll understand why some rules should never be broken. Drop a comment below if you've ever felt that chill, that inexplicable dread near water. Because after tonight, you'll never look at rivers the same way again. Now, let me tell you what really happens on the Mississippi after dark. The story begins now. My name's Jake Thornton, and 3 weeks ago, I took a job I should have walked away from. 28 years old, fresh out of the merchant marines, I figured working a cargo barge on the Mississippi would be easy money. Simple work. Good pay. The recruiting officer in Memphis made it sound like a paid vacation. Just follow the rules, he'd said, tapping a yellowed piece of paper on his desk. The river's got its ways. I barely glanced at that paper. Should have read every word, memorized them, tattooed them on my damn arm. The MV, Charlotte, pushed off from Baton Rouge on a Tuesday morning, October 15th. The crew was small, just 7 of us. Captain Roy Hutchins, a man who looked like he'd been carved from driftwood. The engineer, Tommy, barely spoke above a whisper. The cook, Miss Sarah, always humming old spirituals. And 3 other deckhands like me, though they'd all been on the river longer. That first day was normal. We loaded grain containers, secured the barges, did the safety checks. The Mississippi stretched out before us like a brown serpent, lazy and wide. I remember thinking how peaceful it looked, but even that first day, I noticed things that didn't add up. The way other barge crews waved at us. Not casual greetings, but specific hand signals. 3 fingers raised, then 2, then 1. Always in that order. Captain Roy would respond with the same sequence, his weathered hands moving with practiced precision. "What's with the hand signals?" I asked during my first break. "Communication," Roy replied, but his eyes didn't meet mine. River folk have their own language. The containers we were hauling were standard grain shipments, at least according to the manifest. But some of them felt different when we secured the tie-downs, heavier than they should be. And they hummed, not the vibration of the engines, but something else. Something that made my teeth ache. Tommy was the first to pull me aside that evening, just as the sun started bleeding orange across the water. "You read the rules?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the engine's hum. "Yeah, sure," I lied. He grabbed my arm, his fingers surprisingly strong. "No." "Did you read them?" Something in his eyes made my stomach turn. I shook my head. He pulled out a laminated card from his pocket, worn smooth from handling. The plastic was yellow with age, the text faded but still legible. "Keep this on you. Always." The card listed 7 rules. 1. Never whistle on the water after sunset. 2. If you hear your name called from the river, don't answer. 3. Count the lights on passing barges. If there's one too many, look away. 4. The river gives and takes in 3s. Respect the pattern. 5. Never throw anything living into the water between midnight and dawn. 6. If the water turns still when it should be moving, go below deck 7. When the fog comes red, follow the old protocols. "What's this about?" I asked, trying to laugh it off. "Some kind of hazing?" Tommy just stared at me. "The river's older than you think, boy. older than New Orleans, older than the natives who first named it. And old things, they got old rules. He leaned closer, his breath smelling of coffee and something metallic. You know what they called this river before we named it Mississippi? Mississippi, the Great River. But before that, before the Ojibwe, before any tribe we know about, it had another name. A name in a language that died out before history began. I pocketed the card, mostly to get him to let go of my arm. That night, I heard my first whistle. It came from the port side, clear and melodic, like someone calling a dog home. I was on watch, fighting to stay awake at 2 a.m., when that sound drifted across the black water. Without thinking, I pursed my lips to whistle back. A natural response. You know, like when someone waves and you wave back. Captain Roy's hand clamped over my mouth so fast I nearly screamed. Don't. His breath smelled like coffee and fear. Never, ever whistle back. He stayed with me the rest of my watch, his eyes scanning the water. About an hour later, we passed another barge heading south. I started counting its lights automatically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the port. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the starboard. 6? Look away, Roy hissed. But I couldn't. That sixth light, it wasn't electric. It flickered like a candle or a lantern. And behind it, I swear I saw a shadow that didn't match any crew member's shape. Too tall, too thin, moving in ways that made my eyes water. The figure seemed to notice my attention. It turned toward our barge, and even across the dark water, I could feel its gaze. Cold, ancient, hungry. That's when I smelled it again. That copper earth scent, but stronger now. Mixed with something else, something that reminded me of my grandmother's funeral parlor. That chemical sweetness that couldn't quite mask what lay beneath. The barge passed. Roy finally exhaled. You're learning, he said. Most don't pay attention until it's too late. Until what's too late? He pointed to the river. The Mississippis carried more than cargo for 300 years. Every soul that's died in these waters, every secret dropped over the side, every broken promise and blood debt, the river remembers them all. And sometimes, he paused, sometimes it collects. I wanted to laugh, this was insane, but then I remembered that sixth light and the way the figure had moved. No living person moved like that. Joints bending in directions that defied anatomy, arms reaching too far, neck turning too much. What was that thing? I asked. Passenger, Roy said simply. Been riding the river longer than any of us been alive. Maybe longer than our grandfathers been alive. Some folks, when they die on the water, they don't leave, they just change their shift. The next morning, Miss Itoera served breakfast in the galley. Scrambled eggs, bacon, grits, normal food that tasted like ash in my mouth. One of the other deckhands, Marcus, was missing. Where's Marcus? I asked. Everyone stopped eating. Marcus answered, Tommy whispered. Answered what? His name. The river called his name last night, and he answered. I pushed my plate away. That's... You're telling me he just disappeared because he answered when someone called his name? Captain Roy set down his coffee mug. The ceramic clicking against the metal table sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Not someone, he said. Something. The river doesn't use its own voice. It uses the voices it's collected. Your mother, your brother, your best friend from high school. Whoever will make you answer without thinking. Miss Sarah finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus told me yesterday. Said he kept hearing his daughter calling for help. His daughter who died in a car accident 3 years ago. She shook her head sadly, Poor boy's been carrying that grief around like a stone in his chest. The river, it can smell grief, uses it like bait. And Marcus, we'll find him in 3 days, Miss Sarah interrupted. Her humming stopped for the first time since I'd met her. The river gives and takes in threes. 3 hours, 3 days, or 3 weeks, Marcus answered, so 3 days. She was right. We found him caught in the port paddle wheel 72 hours later, to the minute. His eyes were gone, but his mouth was full of river silt and small shells, the kind you don't find in the Mississippi, the kind you'd find in an ocean that dried up millions of years ago. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was his expression. Peaceful, like he'd finally found whatever he'd been looking for, like dying had been a relief. We wrapped him in a tarp and radioed ahead to Vicksburg, standard procedure for accidents on the river. Except this wasn't an accident. That night, I actually read the rules. Really read them. And I started noticing things. Other barges followed the same patterns. Crews that went below deck at specific times. Lights that were arranged in careful configurations. Hand signals between passing vessels that weren't in any maritime manual. The humming containers made more sense now, too. They weren't just grain shipments. They were offerings, payment, tribute to whatever lived in the deep places where sunlight never reached. We were all following the old protocols, every barge on the Mississippi. A secret shared by thousands of river workers, never spoken about on shore, never reported to the authorities. Because what would we say? That the river is hungry? That it feeds on the unwary? That there are things in the muddy depths that have been waiting, watching, collecting, for longer than America has existed? No one would believe us. But you're starting to believe, aren't you? I can tell. You're probably pulling your blanket a little tighter right now, maybe glancing at the glass of water on your nightstand differently. Good, you should be nervous, because I haven't even told you about the red fog yet. Day 5 on the Charlotte. We were making good time towards St. Louis. The barges riding smooth despite the October current. I'd started to adapt to the rhythm, checking the rules obsessively, counting lights, never whistling, never answering voices from the water. But you can't prepare for everything. It started around 3 p.m., wisps of fog despite the warm afternoon. Not unusual for the Mississippi, except this fog had a tint to it, like someone had mixed rust into the water vapor. Captain Roy's face went pale as November snow. "All stop," he barked into the radio. "All stop and anchor, now." The engines died. The sudden silence felt wrong, like the world had stopped breathing. The red fog thickened, crawling across the water like something alive. "Below deck," Roy ordered. "Everyone, now." "But someone needs to maintain watch," I started. "The old protocols override Coast Guard regulations," he snapped. "When the red fog comes, you go below and you wait." We crowded into the galley, 7 souls pressed against the small portholes, watching the world outside turn crimson. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in as many seconds. Ice formed on the windows despite the Louisiana heat. That's when we heard them, the other barges, dozens of them, hundreds maybe, their engines silent but their hulls creaking and groaning as they passed. Through the red fog I could make out shapes, barges that looked wrong, too old, flying flags from companies that went bankrupt decades ago. Some had paddle wheels that shouldn't exist anymore. Others had smokestacks belching black smoke from coal furnaces. "Don't look too close," Miss Sarah whispered, her fingers working a rosary I hadn't noticed before. The red fog brings them through, all the vessels the rivers claimed. They're sailing their routes still, following contracts that expired before your grandparents were born. One barge passed close enough that I could read the name on its hull, Sultana. I knew that name. Every river worker did. The Sultana exploded in 1865, killing more people than the Titanic, the worst maritime disaster in U.S. history. Through its broken windows I saw lights moving, but not electric lights. Lanterns, oil lamps, and shadows of people who shouldn't be there, couldn't be there. Someone was whistling on that ghost barge. A jaunty tune I recognized but couldn't place. Then another whistle joined from a different vessel. Then another, until the red fog filled with a symphony of whistles. Tommy started to purse his lips. I slapped my hand over his mouth the way Captain Roy had done to me. His eyes were glazed, unfocused. The whistling was calling to him, pulling at something deep in his brain. "Fight it," I hissed. "It's not real." But it was real, just a different kind of real. The past bleeding through, the river showing us what it remembered, what it kept. The red fog lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of ghost barges passing, of whistling that tried to crawl into our skulls, of voices calling our names in languages that predated English, French, Spanish, maybe predated human speech altogether. When it finally cleared, the sun was setting, painting the normal world in colors that felt fake after the supernatural crimson we'd endured. Captain Roy did a head count. We'd all made it, though Tommy's eyes remained unfocused for hours afterward. "How often does that happen?" I asked. "The red fog? Maybe 3-4 times a year, always without warning. The river decides when to remember, when to show us what it's collected. And those barges, those were all, every vessel that's sunk in the Mississippi, every soul lost to the water. They're still here, still sailing, still following their routes in whatever dimension the river keeps them." I thought about all the traffic on the Mississippi, thousands of barges every year, 300 years of commerce, of accidents, of disasters. "How many?" I asked. Roy shook his head. "You don't want to know, son. You really don't want to know." But I did know, or at least I could guess. Tens of thousands of vessels, hundreds of thousands of souls, all collected by the river, all waiting in that red fog, all following their eternal routes. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the hull sounded like those ghost barges. Every splash of water against the sides could have been someone, something, trying to board. I stood on deck, watching the river flow under the stars, and I noticed something that made my blood freeze. Our wake, the disturbed water behind our barges. It was forming patterns, deliberate patterns, like something massive beneath the surface was writing messages in the current. I grabbed a flashlight, traced the patterns with the beam. They were words, ancient words. Words in languages I didn't recognize but somehow understood. The river remembers. The river requires. The river returns. 3 statements, always in threes. I was starting to understand the rules weren't just superstition. They were a treaty, an agreement between the living and whatever the Mississippi really was. We follow the protocols, and it lets us pass. But treaties can be broken. And on day 7, that's exactly what happened. His name was Dale, new deckhand we picked up in Cairo, Illinois. Cocky kid from Chicago who thought river work would be an adventure. Captain Roy tried to give him the rules, but Dale laughed them off. "Superstitious garbage," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is the 21st century, not some Mark Twain fairy tale." Dale was everything Marcus hadn't been. Loud, dismissive, convinced that his college education made him smarter than men who'd spent decades on the water. He'd studied environmental science, knew all about river ecosystems and sediment patterns and water chemistry. What he didn't know was that some knowledge is older than textbooks. "You really believe this stuff?" he asked me that evening, waving the laminated rule card like it was a joke. "Counting lights? Not whistling? Come on, man, it's just a river. I tried to explain what I'd seen. The sixth light, the figure that moved wrong, the red fog and ghost barges, but every word made him laugh harder. Mass hallucination, he said confidently. Carbon monoxide from the engines. Sleep deprivation. Isolation psychosis. There's a scientific explanation for all of it. Maybe there was. Maybe every river worker for 3 centuries had been suffering from the same collective delusion. Maybe the patterns in our wake were just random turbulence. Maybe Marcus had simply fallen overboard in his grief-stricken state. But I'd seen that sixth light. I'd smelled that copper earth scent. I'd watched ice form on windows in Louisiana heat. Some things can't be explained by environmental science. That night, he threw his cigarette into the water. At 12:47 a.m. living tissue, human cells, saliva, thrown into the river between midnight and dawn. Rule number 5. Shattered. The river went still. Not calm, still, like glass, like a mirror. The current that had pushed us for 7 days just stopped. Captain Roy burst from his cabin, his face twisted in terror I'd never seen before. All hands implement Emergency Protocol 7. Repeat, Protocol 7 immediately. I didn't know what Protocol 7 was, but the older crew did. They started throwing things overboard, specific things, coffee, exactly 3 cups, coins, 3 silver dollars each, and blood. They all pricked their fingers and let exactly 3 drops fall into the still water. Offerings, Miss, Sarah explained, her voice shaking. The river was disrespected. It needs appeasement. The coins sank without a splash, disappearing into water so still it looked solid. The blood spread in perfect circles, 3 drops becoming 3 rings of red that didn't dissipate or flow with any current. But Dale just laughed. "You're all insane. It's just a river. Water and mud and—" The sound that came from beneath us killed his words. Like a whale's song mixed with grinding metal, mixed with something that might have been laughter. The hull vibrated. The lights flickered. And then the water around us began to spiral. Not a whirlpool. Not exactly. The water was moving, but we weren't being pulled. Instead, things were rising from the depths. Debris at first, logs, trash, twisted metal from long-dead barges. Then the bodies started surfacing. Dozens of them, perfectly preserved by the cold, deep water. Some in modern clothes, others in uniforms from wars I could only guess at. They floated face down in perfect circles around our barge. 3 rings of corpses like some hellish bullseye. Dale wasn't laughing anymore. "The river's showing us its collection," Captain Roy said, his voice steady despite the horror. "Every broken rule has a price. It's showing us what happens to those who don't pay." One of the bodies turned over. It was Marcus, but not the Marcus we'd pulled from the paddle wheel. This was Marcus as he must have looked the moment he answered his name, eyes wide with recognition, mouth open in surprise. Skin pale as paper. Then another body turned, a woman in a 1950s dress, a man in Confederate gray, a child in clothes so old they looked handmade. All of them had their eyes open. All of them were looking at Dale. I don't. Dale stumbled backward. "You broke the treaty," Tommy said, finding his voice for the first time since the red fog. "The river demands payment. 3 lives for 1 broken rule, or what? Or 1 life given freely." The meaning was clear. Dale could sacrifice himself, or 3 of us would be taken. I wish I could tell you Dale was brave, that he accepted responsibility, that he stepped forward and saved us all. But he ran. Tried to anyway. He made it 5 steps before the river itself seemed to reach up. water-defying physics, forming tentacles or arms or something that didn't have a name, and pulled him over the side. He didn't even have time to scream. The water immediately returned to normal, current resuming, bodies sinking back into the depths, like nothing had happened. We never reported Dale missing. What would we say? The river took him as payment for breaking ancient rules? No, officially, Dale never existed. Never signed on, never was. The last 3 days of my journey passed in silence. No one spoke unless necessary. We all followed the rules with religious dedication. Even breathing felt like it might violate some unknown protocol. When we finally docked in St. Louis, I walked off that barge and never looked back. Didn't even collect my last paycheck. Some money isn't worth the price. But here's the thing, and this is why I'm telling you this story. Why I need you to understand, the rules aren't just for the Mississippi. Every river has them. Every body of water old enough to remember. The Hudson has its own protocols. The Colorado demands different offerings. The Great Lakes, the Great Lakes have rules that would make your hair turn white. I spent months researching after I left the river, trying to understand what I'd experienced. What I found was a pattern, a network of knowledge passed down through generations of people who work on the water. Sailors have their superstitions. Fishermen have their taboos. Every coastal town has stories about things that shouldn't be there. Lights where there should be darkness. Voices where there should be silence. The Ojibwe called the Mississippi Mississippi, the Great River. But their older stories, the ones they don't tell outsiders, speak of something else. A presence in the water. A consciousness that existed before the first fish swam upstream. Before the first rainfall carved channels through virgin soil. They made their own treaties with this presence. Different rules, but the same basic principle. Respect and be allowed to pass. Disrespect and pay the price. When European settlers arrived, when steamboats started carrying cargo up and down the river, the old treaties had to be renegotiated. New rules for new people, but the same ancient intelligence deciding who lived and who died. We've built our civilization on top of something ancient, something that was here before us and will be here long after we're gone. We've made treaties we don't remember signing, agreements that bind us to things we pretend don't exist, and the water remembers, it always remembers. The 7 rules I memorized on the Mississippi, they're just one version of a much older contract. Every river worker learns them, passes them down, follows them without question because the alternative is too horrible to consider. But there are other versions, other rules for other waters. The Great Lakes require different protocols entirely. Never sail alone during the storm season. Always carry iron, old iron, cold iron. If you see lights beneath the surface and count them, if there are 13, turn back immediately. The Colorado demands blood, just 3 drops, at the beginning of every journey. The river is young and violent, hungrier than its older siblings, more likely to take without warning. The Hudson is different, older, more patient. It prefers offerings of memory, stories told aloud while crossing certain stretches. Feed it your experiences, your histories, your secrets. The river collects human stories the way others collect coins. Ocean waters follow different rules entirely, older rules. More complex treaties that span centuries and cultures. Every sailor knows them, even if they don't understand why they know them. Don't whistle during a storm. Count the albatross. Never kill a dolphin. Throw bread to the waves during certain seasons. Bury your dead at sea with specific rituals, specific words, specific offerings. Break these rules, and the ocean remembers. I've talked to fishermen from Maine, cargo pilots on the Great Lakes, tugboat operators on the Hudson. They all have stories. They all follow rules that can't be found in any maritime manual, and they all agree on one thing: the water is getting hungrier. Climate change, pollution, overfishing. We're stressing the waters in ways they've never experienced before. The old treaties are straining. The ancient presences that inhabit our rivers and lakes and oceans are running out of patience. More ships disappear now than ever before. More bodies surface with impossible causes of death. More crews report seeing lights where there should be none. Hearing voices where there should be silence. The water is sending us messages, warning us, showing us what happens when treaties are broken on a global scale. So, the next time you're near a river, any river, and you hear something calling your name, or see one too many lights, or notice the water going still when it shouldn't, remember the rules, remember the protocols. Remember that some treaties are written in blood and time, and breaking them costs more than you can afford to pay. Epilogue. The desert. I live in Arizona now. The desert. As far from major rivers as I could get. But sometimes, late at night, I still smell it. Copper and earth. The scent of hungry water. And I know the river remembers me. It remembers all of us who've sailed its surface, who've learned its rules, who've seen what lurks beneath. Even here in the desert, hundreds of miles from the nearest navigable water. I can feel it calling. Not my name, not yet, but something deeper. A summons that bypasses language entirely and speaks directly to the part of my brain that still remembers when humans were just another species trying to survive in a world full of older, hungrier things. The Sonoran Desert has its own dangers. Rattlesnakes and scorpions and heat that can kill you in hours. But these are honest dangers, natural dangers, things you can understand and prepare for and sometimes overcome. The Mississippi is something else entirely. An intelligence that predates civilization, that has watched every empire rise and fall from the comfort of its muddy depths, that collects human stories like trophies and human souls like currency. I thought distance would protect me from its influence. I thought living in a place where water is scarce and precious would insulate me from the river's hunger. I was wrong. Last week, I found a shell in my backyard. A freshwater mussel shell, the kind you find in the Mississippi River basin. Perfectly preserved, still damp, sitting on my patio table like someone had just placed it there. There are no freshwater mussels in the Sonoran Desert. There's barely any fresh water at all. But there it was. A message, a reminder. The river remembers. If you've made it this far, if you're still listening, then you're part of it now too. The knowledge is in you. The awareness that water is more than hydrogen and oxygen, that rivers are more than geography. Comment below if you've ever experienced something unexplainable near water. Share this with someone who needs to know the truth. Subscribe if you want to hear more about the treaties we've forgotten, the rules we never knew existed. Because this isn't the only story. Every river worker has them, every sailor, every person who spent real time on the water. We all know the truth. The water is alive, the water is hungry, and the water never, ever forgets. Sweet dreams, and remember, if you hear whistling tonight, especially if you live near water, don't whistle back. Story number 2. Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you happened 3 nights ago at the Millstone nuclear plant in Connecticut, and I still can't explain it. I've worked security there for 12 years, seen my share of odd things, but nothing like this. Nothing that made me question whether time itself can break. You ever notice how digital clocks sometimes glitch? How they display impossible times for just a second before correcting themselves? Most people think it's just a malfunction, a quirk of technology. But what if I told you that sometimes, just sometimes, those glitches show you something real, something that shouldn't exist? Before I tell you what happened, let me ask you this. Have you checked your clock lately? I mean, really checked it? Because after what I saw, I can't stop watching mine. Waiting. Wondering if it'll happen again. The story begins now. My name's Marcus Thompson. I've been doing the night security rounds at Millstone for over a decade. Same route every night. Check the perimeter. Monitor the cooling towers. Verify all access points. Boring work mostly. The kind of job where the biggest excitement is usually a raccoon setting off the motion sensors. That Tuesday started like any other. I clocked in at 11:47 p.m., grabbed my flashlight and radio from the security office. Jerry was finishing his shift, looked more tired than usual. "Everything quiet?" I asked him. He paused, rubbed his eyes. "Yeah, mostly. Just, the clocks have been acting weird in Sector 7. "Weird how?" "I don't know, man. They keep jumping around. Maintenance says it's probably just interference from the new equipment they installed last week." He grabbed his jacket. "Oh, and Rodriguez called in sick. You're on your own tonight." "Great, solo shift at a nuclear plant. What could go wrong?" The first few hours passed without incident. I made my rounds, checked my stations, filled out the hourly logs. The plant hummed with its usual mechanical rhythm. That constant, low vibration you feel more than hear. After 12 years, it becomes like a heartbeat. Comforting, almost. Around 3 a.m., I was in the main control room grabbing coffee when I noticed it. The digital clock on the wall, it read 3:17 a.m. I checked my watch. 3:17 a.m., looked at my phone. 3:17 a.m. Everything synced up perfectly. But then, for just a fraction of a second, I could have sworn the wall clock flickered. Not to 3:18, not backwards to 3:16. It showed 6:46 a.m. I blinked. The clock read 3:17 a.m. again. I laughed at myself. Too much coffee, not enough sleep. Your eyes play tricks on you during the graveyard shift. Everyone knows that. I made a note in the log about the clock glitch, standard procedure, and continued my rounds. The next hour was routine. Checked the emergency exits, verified the backup generators, walked the perimeter fence. The Connecticut woods pressed dark against the chain link, and fog was rolling in from Long Island Sound. Pretty typical for October. At 4:30 a.m., I was heading to Sector 7, the newest part of the facility. They'd just finished installing some kind of experimental monitoring system. Quantum something or other. I didn't understand the science, above my pay grade, but I knew my job. Make sure no one was where they shouldn't be. The hallway to Sector 7 always felt different from the rest of the plant. Newer. Colder. The fluorescent lights had this barely perceptible flicker, like they were vibrating at a frequency just outside normal perception. Made my teeth ache sometimes. I badged into the monitoring room. Banks of screens showed various readings I didn't understand. Numbers and graphs updating in real time. Everything looked normal, except every single digital clock in the room showed a different time. 4:31 a.m. on one screen, 4:33 a.m. on another, 4:29 a.m. on the wall. My watch said 4:32 a.m. I pulled out my phone to check, and that's when things got strange. Really strange. My phone screen went black for a second. When it came back, the time display was glitching. The numbers kept changing. 4:32 a.m., 5:45 a.m., 2:17 a.m., and then 6:66 a.m. This time it stayed there for 3 full seconds. 6 a.m. An impossible time. There's no 66th minute in an hour. Every kid knows that. But there it was, glowing on my screen like it was the most natural thing in the world. Then my radio crackled. Security, please respond. But here's the thing. That wasn't dispatch. The voice was different. Familiar, but wrong. Like someone doing an impression of our dispatcher, Katie, but not quite getting it right. This is Thompson in Sector 7. Who is this? Static. Then, security. Please report to Reactor Building 3. Immediately, my blood went cold. We don't have a Reactor Building 3. Millstone has 2 reactor buildings. Unit 2 and Unit 3, no one who works here would ever call it Reactor Building 3. They'd say Unit 3. Say again, dispatch. Did you mean Unit 3? More static. Then nothing. I tried calling the main security office. No answer. Tried Katie's direct line. Dead air. That's when I noticed the humming had stopped. If you've never been in a nuclear plant, you might not understand how wrong that is. The humming never stops. Ever. It's the sound of coolant pumps, ventilation systems, 1,000 different machines keeping everything stable. When that sound stops, I ran to the window. The cooling towers were still steaming. The exterior lights were still on. Everything looked normal. But the silence, God, the silence was suffocating. I checked the monitoring screens again. The readings were wrong. Not dangerous wrong, just impossible wrong. Temperature readings in negative Kelvin, pressure readings that violated basic physics, and the timestamps. Every single entry was marked 6:46 a.m. I need you to understand something. I'm not a superstitious person. I don't believe in ghosts or demons or any of that. I believe in what I can see, touch, measure. But what I saw next challenged everything I thought I knew about reality. I left Sector 7 and headed for the main control room. The hallways were still lit, but the light seemed thinner somehow, like it wasn't quite reaching all the corners. My footsteps echoed wrong. Too many times. Like the sound was bouncing off walls that weren't there. Halfway to the control room, I passed a window overlooking the parking lot. My truck was there. Jerry's car was gone. But there were 3 other vehicles I didn't recognize. Old models, like from the 80s or 90s. One of them, I swear one of them was the same Ford Taurus my dad used to drive. Same color, same dent in the front bumper from when I backed into a mailbox when I was 16. But that car had been junked 15 years ago. I kept moving. The control room door was closed, which was unusual. It's supposed to stay open during night shift for security checks. I could see light underneath, but it was flickering, pulsing almost. I pushed open the door. The room was empty, but all the monitors were on, and they were showing something. Not the usual reactor data. They were showing security footage, but not from tonight. One screen showed me, but younger, maybe from my first year at the plant. I was doing my rounds, same as always. Another screen showed Jerry, but Jerry from last week, having a conversation with someone just out of frame. A third showed the parking lot, in real time, I think. My truck sitting alone under the sodium lights. But the main screen, the big one that usually shows the reactor core status, that one showed something else. It showed this room, the control room, right now, with me standing in the doorway. But in the footage, I wasn't alone. There was someone standing behind me. I spun around, nobody there, just the empty hallway. I looked back at the screen. The figure was still there, standing just over my shoulder in the footage. Tall, wearing a Millstone security uniform. But the face was wrong. It kept shifting, like it couldn't decide what it wanted to look like. Sometimes it was Jerry, sometimes it was Rodriguez, sometimes it was me. My radio crackled again. Marcus. That wasn't dispatch. That was my voice, my exact voice. Marcus, you need to come to Unit 3 now. Who is this? You know who this is. I'm you. From 6:46 a.m. My hands were shaking. This wasn't possible. None of this was possible. There's no such time as 6:66 a.m. The voice on the radio laughed. My laugh. There is now. There has to be, because that's where you are. I looked at the clocks. Every single one in the control room now showed 6:66 a.m. But they weren't moving. The seconds weren't ticking. Time had stopped. Number. Not stopped. Shifted. What do you want? I asked the radio. I want you to understand. Every night, between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m., there's a minute that doesn't exist. A minute that falls between the cracks. And sometimes, if the conditions are just right, if the quantum field fluctuations from the experimental equipment in Sector 7 align just so, that minute becomes accessible. This is insane. Is it? You're living it right now. You're in the 66th minute of the 6 o'clock hour. A minute that shouldn't exist, but does. And Marcus, you're not the first one to find it. The screens started changing, showing different people, different years, all security guards, all doing their rounds, all looking confused, terrified. I recognized some of them. Patterson, who quit suddenly in 2018, Morrison, who had that nervous breakdown in 2020, Chen, who swore he saw things and transferred to day shift. They'd all been here, in the 6:66 moment. What happened to them? I asked. They left. They found their way back to normal time and pretended it never happened. But you can't unsee what you've seen, Marcus. You can't unknow what you now know. That time isn't as solid as you think. That reality has gaps. The lights flickered again. When they steadied, someone was standing by the main console. It was me, another me, wearing the same uniform, holding the same flashlight, but his eyes were older, tired, like he'd seen too much. "Hello, Marcus," he said. I stood there, staring at myself, my other self. He looked exactly like me, down to the small scar on my left hand from that accident in high school. But something was fundamentally different. The way he moved, too smooth, like he was sliding through space rather than walking through it. "This isn't real," I said. "Define real," the other me replied. "Is real what you can touch?" He picked up a coffee mug from the console, the same Dunkin' Donuts mug I'd been drinking from earlier. "Is it what you can see?" He gestured at himself. "Or is real simply what exists, regardless of whether it should? You're not me. I'm not you yet." He set down the mug. "But you're becoming me. Every second you spend in the 66th minute, you're becoming something else. Something that exists between moments." The monitors behind him started showing new footage. Not security cameras this time. Different angles of the same scene, this room, right now, but from perspectives that didn't make sense. Views from inside the walls, from beneath the floor, from somewhere above that couldn't exist in the building's architecture. "You want to know what happened to the others?" the other me asked. "Patterson? Morrison? Chen? They're still here, part of them anyway, stuck in loops of their own 66th minutes, playing out the same confused terror over and over." As if to prove his point, the door opened. Patterson walked in. But it wasn't really walking, it was more like stuttering, moving forward in jumps, like a video skipping frames. "Hey, Marcus," Patterson said. His voice was hollow, recorded. "Have you seen the time? Something's wrong with the clocks." Then he disappeared, blinked out of existence. "He'll be back," the other me said. In about 3 minutes of subjective time, same routine, same words. He's been doing that for 6 years. This is impossible. The experimental equipment in Sector 7 doesn't just monitor quantum fields, Marcus. It disturbs them, creates pockets where the laws of physics get flexible. The scientists don't know this yet, won't know for another 2 years of regular time, but here, in the 66th minute, the effects are already visible. My radio crackled. Different voice this time. Rodriguez. Marcus, don't listen to him. Get out. Get out now. The other me smiled. Rodriguez figured it out, how to leave, but he paid a price. Tell me, Marcus, has Rodriguez seemed different lately, since he started calling in sick? I thought about it. Rodriguez had been acting strange for the past month. Jumpy, always checking his watch, always muttering about time. He remembers, the other me continued. Even after leaving the 66th minute, he remembers. And that memory is eating him alive. Because once you know time can break, once you've seen the gaps, you can never trust reality again. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. But the monitors stayed on, glowing with that impossible timestamp. 6:66 a.m. You have a choice, the other me said in the darkness. You can try to leave. Find your way back to normal time. Live with the knowledge of what you've seen. Or ... quote. Or what? Or you can stay. Become like me, a guardian of the 66th minute, making sure nothing from here leaks into normal time, making sure the gap doesn't widen. Why would I do that? He pointed at the monitors. They were showing something new now, the reactor core. But not as it should be. The fuel rods were arranged wrong, glowing with colors that shouldn't exist. And the readings, because, he said, in exactly 17 cycles of the 66th minute, the quantum disturbance from Sector 7 is going to synchronize with the reactor's resonance frequency. And when that happens, the 66th minute won't be contained anymore. It'll spread, backward and forward through time, creating paradoxes, destroying causality, unmaking everything. You're lying. Check for yourself. He handed me a tablet. The data was all there. Mathematical models I didn't fully understand, but the conclusion was clear. The 66th minute was growing. Each time someone entered it, it became more stable, more real. The others who got stuck here, he explained, they're not trapped by accident. They're anchors, keeping the 66th minute from collapsing in on itself. But we need more. We need someone who understands, someone who can make the choice willingly. And if I say no, then you leave, if you can find the way. But Marcus, look at your watch. I looked. It still said 6:66 a.m. But now I noticed something else. The second hand was moving, but not forward. It was moving backward. You've been here for negative 17 minutes, the other me said. Time isn't just stopped for you. It's inverting. The longer you stay, the harder it becomes to synchronize with normal time again. Patterson waited too long. That's why he stutters through space. He's caught between flowing forward and backward simultaneously. The door opened again. Patterson reappeared. Hey Marcus, have you seen the time? Something's wrong with the clocks. Same words, same hollow tone. But this time I noticed something else. His shadow was moving independently, pointing in the wrong direction, like it belonged to a different time of day. I need to think, I said. Think fast, the other me replied. In subjective time, you have about 6 minutes before the inversion becomes permanent. After that, you're one of us, whether you choose it or not. I ran, out of the control room, down the hallway, trying to find something, anything that made sense. But the plant had become a maze of impossibilities. Doors led to rooms that shouldn't exist. Hallways doubled back on themselves, and everywhere there were clocks showing 6:66 a.m. I passed windows that showed different times of day simultaneously. Dawn on the left side, midnight on the right. The parking lot kept changing. Sometimes empty, sometimes full of cars from different decades. Once, I saw myself arriving for my shift, but I looked younger, like it was my first day. The radio kept crackling with voices, some I recognized, some I didn't, all telling me different things. Go to Sector 7. Stay away from the reactor. Find the emergency exit. There is no exit. Marcus, this is Katie. Where are you? That last one made me stop. Katie's voice sounded real, present, not like the hollow recordings of the trapped guards. Katie, is that really you? Marcus, thank God, you've been missing for 3 hours. Where are you? 3 hours? But I'd only been in the 66th minute for... I looked at my watch. Still 6:66 a.m. But my phone... When had I pulled out my phone? It showed 7:13 a.m. Katie, something's wrong with time. Marcus, listen to me. We've been monitoring strange readings from Sector 7. The experimental equipment is malfunctioning. You need to get out of there now. But which Katie was this? The real one from normal time? Or another echo in the 66th minute? I kept moving, found myself in Sector 7 again. The monitoring room looked different now, older, newer, both at once. The screens showed impossibilities, the reactor core from angles that didn't exist, the parking lot from above and below simultaneously, and in the center of it all, a door that wasn't there before. Not a normal door, it hurt to look at, like my eyes couldn't quite focus on its edges. But I knew, somehow I knew. It was a way out. I reached for the handle. Don't. The other me was back. But not just one of him, 3, 4, a dozen, all slightly different. Some older, some younger, all wearing security uniforms from different eras of the plant's operation. If you open that door, they said in unison, you'll collapse the 66th minute. Everything trapped here will pour into normal time. Every paradox, every impossibility. The plant won't just melt down. It'll cease to have ever existed. You're lying. Are we? They gestured at the screens. Look. The monitors showed the outside world, but it was wrong. The plant was there and not there. Existing and not existing. People were walking through walls that were solid and permeable at once. Time was flowing in all directions. This is what happens when the 66th minute destabilizes, they said. We're not prison guards, Marcus. We're protectors. Keeping the impossible contained, my phone rang. An impossible thing, since there was no signal in Sector 7. The caller ID said, Mom. But my mom had been dead for 5 years. I answered, Marcus? Honey, where are you? You were supposed to come for dinner. Her voice. Exactly her voice. But she was dead. I'd been at her funeral, unless... When is dinner, Mom? Same as always, Sunday at 6. What year is it? She laughed. Have you been drinking? It's 2019. 2019, the year she died. But she was calling me in 2024. Or was it 2024? Was I in 2024? Or was I in the 66th minute of an hour that existed outside of time? The other versions of me were watching, waiting. I have to go, Mom. Okay, honey. See you Sunday. The line went dead, and I understood. The 66th minute wasn't just a glitch in time. It was where all the lost moments went. The seconds that fell between the cracks, the minutes that got skipped when clocks jumped forward, the hours that disappeared when we fell back for daylight saving. They all ended up here, in the impossible minute. And if I opened that door, if I let them all out, but if I stayed, you'll forget, one of the other EMEs said. Eventually. The specifics fade. You'll remember you have a job to do. Keep the minute stable. Keep the paradoxes contained. but you'll forget why it matters until another guard finds their way here. And then you'll try to explain. Try to make them understand. Just like I'm trying to make you understand now. How long have you been here? They all answered at once. Different answers. 6 months. 2 years. Always. Never. Time doesn't work that way here. I looked at the door again, then at my watch. Still 6:66 a.m. But the second hand had stopped moving backward. It was frozen, balanced on the edge of decision. My radio crackled one more time. Marcus. It was Rodriguez, real Rodriguez, current Rodriguez. I know you're there. In the minute, I was there too. Last month. And I made the wrong choice. I ran, forced my way out. And now I see it everywhere. The cracks in time, the moments that don't line up. People repeating words they haven't said yet. Shadows falling the wrong way. Marcus, there are only 2 choices. Stay and forget who you were, or leave and never forget what you've seen. I stood there, in a room that existed and didn't exist, in a minute that was real and impossible, with a choice that would define not just my future, but my past and present too. The door waited. The other versions of me waited. Time itself waited. I made my choice. What I haven't told you yet is what happened in those final moments before I chose. Because in the 66th minute, final moments can stretch into eternities, and eternities can collapse into heartbeats. As I stood there, hand hovering over that impossible door handle, I began to understand something the other versions of me hadn't explained. The 66th minute wasn't just collecting lost time, it was collecting lost people. Everyone who had ever felt displaced in their own life. Everyone who had ever experienced that strange sensation of being slightly out of sync with reality. The monitors around me flickered, and suddenly I was seeing more than just security footage. I was seeing lives. Fragments of existence from people who had stumbled into moments that didn't quite fit. A woman in Detroit who kept arriving at appointments 5 minutes before they were scheduled, but no clock ever showed her being early. A man in Phoenix who aged 1 day slower than everyone around him, accumulating years of temporal debt that nobody noticed but him. A child in Maine who could sometimes see her own shadow from tomorrow, playing games she hadn't learned yet. They were all connected to this place. All anchored to the 66th minute by the simple act of existing in a world where time occasionally stuttered. "Do you see now?" the other me asked. But it wasn't just one voice anymore. It was dozens, maybe hundreds. All the versions of myself that had stood at this exact crossroads, facing this exact choice. Every time someone chooses wrong, every time someone forces their way out or lets the minute collapse, reality gets a little more damaged, a little more fragile. I thought about Rodriguez, about how he'd seemed hollow lately, not just tired, diminished, like part of him had been left behind in the 66th minute when he escaped. "What happens to the people out there?" I asked, gesturing toward the monitors showing the impossible outside world. The woman who's always early. The man who ages slow. The child with tomorrow's shadow. "If the 66th minute collapses," the chorus of me replied, "they stop existing in any timeline. They become temporal refugees with nowhere to go, and reality starts to unravel. Little things at first. Clocks running backward for a few seconds. People remembering conversations that haven't happened. But it spreads, like a crack in glass. The door's handle felt warm under my almost touch. Beyond it, I could sense the presence of normal time. Normal life. My apartment, my scheduled shifts, the mundane comfort of a world where clocks behaved properly and minutes contained exactly 60 seconds. But I could also sense the cost, not just to me, but to everyone connected to this impossible moment. "How many of you chose to stay?" I asked. "All of us," they said. Eventually, some tried to leave first, like Rodriguez, but they always come back. Because once you know the truth about time, once you understand what's at stake, leaving becomes impossible. My phone buzzed. A text message. From my own number, the harder choice is always the right one. You know this, you've always known this. I looked at my watch one final time. 6:46 a.m. But as I watched, something changed. The seconds began ticking forward again. But slowly, like time was struggling to remember how to move properly. And I realized something else. I wasn't just choosing my own fate. I was choosing the fate of every lost moment, every displaced second, every person who had ever felt slightly out of step with the world around them. The weight of that knowledge settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. I made my choice. You want to know what I chose, don't you? Whether I opened that door or became another guardian of the impossible minute. Here's the thing. I'm not entirely sure myself. I'm here talking to you. It's October now, 3 days after that night shift. I'm in my apartment in Hartford. Everything seems normal. My truck is in the parking lot. My next shift is tomorrow night. But sometimes I check my phone, and for just a second, just the briefest moment, it shows 6:66 a.m., even in the middle of the afternoon. Sometimes I see myself in the mirror, and there's a fraction of a delay, like my reflection is catching up. Sometimes my radio turns on by itself and I hear voices, security chatter from the plant. But they're talking about things that haven't happened yet, or things that happened years ago. Rodriguez quit yesterday, sent an email to HR saying he couldn't do it anymore. Didn't say what it was. And tonight when I was making dinner, my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. Hey Marcus, have you seen the time? Something's wrong with the clocks, Patterson's voice. But Patterson hasn't worked at the plant for 6 years. I hung up, checked my watch. 6:66 p.m. There's no 66 minute in an hour. Everyone knows that. But now I know better. Now I know that time has gaps, cracks, moments that shouldn't exist but do. And sometimes we fall through. The question is, am I still falling? Or did I never leave? Check your clock right now. Go ahead, check it. And if, just for a second, you see an impossible time, remember this story. Remember that somewhere in a nuclear plant in Connecticut there are guards standing watch over a minute that doesn't exist. Keeping it stable. Keeping it contained. Keeping you safe from the truth that time itself is broken, and has been all along. Sweet dreams. Story number 3. My grandfather used to say that some things are better left unnoticed. Like the shadow that doesn't quite match your movements, or the face in Mount Rushmore that only appears when the fog rolls in just right. The one nobody talks about. The one that's been watching since before the other 4 were carved. I know what you're thinking. Mount Rushmore has 4 faces. Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, Lincoln. Everyone knows that. I knew that too, until last October when I took that photography job in the Black Hills. Now I can't unsee what I saw. And the worst part? I think it saw me too. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me ask you something first. When was the last time you really looked at something familiar? I mean really looked. Because sometimes the things we think we know best are hiding secrets in plain sight. And once you see them, well, some doors can't be closed again. If you're still listening after I tell you this, if you're brave enough to hear what really lurks in those granite peaks, then maybe you'll understand why I haven't slept properly in 3 months, why I moved from South Dakota to Florida, why I can't look at fog the same way anymore. The story begins now. October in South Dakota hits different than anywhere else I'd been. The air has teeth, sharp little ones that nip at your exposed skin while the sun pretends everything's fine. I'd driven my beat-up Honda Civic from Minneapolis, chasing a photography gig that promised $5,000 for a week's work. The client, some historical society in Rapid City, wanted atmospheric shots of Mount Rushmore. Specifically, they wanted fog. Morning fog, evening fog, doesn't matter, Mr. Hendricks had said over the phone. His voice had sounded careful, like he was choosing each word from a list of safe options. We need documentation of the monument during unusual weather conditions. $5,000 for fog photos. In this economy, you don't ask questions. The Comfort Inn near Keystone became my base. Room 237. Yeah, I know, like the movie. The irony wasn't lost on me. First night there, I met Denny at the hotel bar. Local guy, worked maintenance at the memorial for 15 years. His hands shook slightly when he lifted his beer, not from age, but from something else. "You're the photographer," he said. Wasn't a question. "That obvious?" He gestured at my camera bag. "That, and Hendricks called. Warned me you'd be coming." He took a long pull from his bottle. "You ever been up there before?" "Saw it as a kid. Family road trip. Different at night, different in the fog." He set his beer down hard enough to make the bartender glance over. "Listen, when you're up there, taking your pictures, don't wander off the paths, and if you see something that doesn't belong..." He paused, rubbing his stubbled jaw. "Just remember that cameras sometimes catch things our eyes miss. And sometimes they catch things our eyes are trying to protect us from." I laughed it off. Small town folks and their stories, right? But Denny didn't smile. He finished his beer in silence and left a 20 on the bar. "One more thing," he said, stopping at the door. "The fog usually comes in around 4:30 in the morning, but some mornings it comes earlier. Those are the mornings you should pack up and leave." The first 2 days were normal, boring even. I got my sunrise shots, some decent fog wisping around Washington's nose, Jefferson disappearing into white nothing. Pretty stuff. Atmospheric, like Hendricks wanted, but nothing worth $5,000. On the third night, I couldn't sleep. The room's heater kept clicking. Click, click, click. Like someone tapping their fingernails on glass. Around 3 a.m., I gave up and decided to head to the memorial early. Maybe catch some pre-dawn shots with the stars. The drive up Highway 244 was wrong. You know how sometimes the world feels like it's holding its breath? Like everything is waiting for something to happen? That's how it felt. No other cars, no animals darting across the road. Even my radio kept cutting to static, though I was well within range of 3 different stations. I parked at the main viewing area. The parking lot was empty except for one park service truck, probably security. The memorial was lit up with spotlights, 4 stone faces glowing against the black sky. But as I set up my tripod, I noticed something odd. The fog was already starting to form, not rolling in from the valleys like it usually did, but materializing right there in the air, like someone was breathing it into existence. I checked my phone. 3:47 a.m. This was the early fog Denny had warned about. I should have left, should have packed up my gear and driven back to the hotel. But $5,000, and honestly, I was curious. What could be so special about early fog? Through my viewfinder, the monument looked different. The fog wasn't just obscuring the faces, it was reshaping them. Washington's stern expression seemed to shift, his eyes tracking something I couldn't see. Jefferson's lips appeared to move, just slightly, like he was trying to speak through stone. That's when I saw it. Between Roosevelt and Lincoln, in that stretch of rough granite that was never carved, there was something else. At first, I thought it was just shadows and fog playing tricks. But as I adjusted my camera's focus, the shape became clearer. A 5th face, not carved like the others, not precise and presidential. This face was organic, like it had grown from the mountain itself. The features were rough but unmistakably human, and ancient. God, it looked ancient. Older than the rock, older than the hills, older than anything should be. My finger hovered over the shutter button. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. The face in the fog, it was beautiful in the way terrible things sometimes are. Hypnotic. I pressed the button. Click. The sound echoed across the empty plaza like a gunshot. And the face turned toward me. You know that feeling when you realize someone's been watching you? That prickle on the back of your neck? Multiply that by 1,000. That's what it felt like when the fifth face noticed me. I lowered my camera slowly. So slowly. Like any sudden movement might make things worse. But I couldn't look away from that space between Roosevelt and Lincoln. The fog was thickening now, pouring from the mountain itself, and within it, that impossible face was becoming clearer. It wasn't looking at me exactly. It was looking through me, into me, like it could see every moment of my life laid out like photographs on a table. Every choice, every regret, every secret I'd buried. My hands shook as I reviewed the photo I'd just taken. On the tiny LCD screen, the image was normal. Just the 4 presidents and fog, no fifth face, nothing unusual at all. But when I looked back up at the mountain, it was still there, clearer than before. And it was smiling? No, not smiling. That expression was something else. Recognition, maybe. Like when you see someone you knew a long time ago, someone you'd forgotten, but who never forgot you. You shouldn't be here. I nearly jumped out of my skin. A park ranger stood 10 feet away. When had he approached? I hadn't heard footsteps, hadn't seen headlights. He was young, maybe 25, with hollow eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. I have permission, I managed, fumbling for the documentation Hendricks had given me. Historical Society hired me to... I know why you're here. His voice was flat, emotionless. But you still shouldn't be here. Not now. Not during the early fog. What's the early fog? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. He stared at the mountain for a long moment. It's when the mountain remembers what was here before. Before the faces. Before the carved presidents. Before everything. He pulled out a cigarette, lit it with shaking hands. My grandmother was Lakota. She told me stories about this place. 6 grandfathers, they called it. Sacred. Then Gutzon Borglum came with his dynamite and his vision, and he carved 4 faces into the mountain. But the mountain already had a face, has had one for longer than anyone knows. The elders say it's the face of the first one, the one who was here when the world was young. Most of the time, it sleeps, hidden, but sometimes, when conditions are just right, it shows itself. I wanted to laugh, wanted to dismiss it as local superstition, but I could see it, right there. That ancient face in the stone watching us through the fog. What does it want? I whispered. The ranger dropped his cigarette, crushed it under his boot. My grandmother said it's looking for something, or someone who can see it truly, not just glimpse it in the fog, but really see it. And when it finds that person... He didn't finish. Didn't need to. I should go, I said, starting to pack up my gear. Too late for that. He pointed to the parking lot. My Honda was gone. The Park Service truck was gone. There was nothing but empty asphalt stretching into fog. Once it's noticed you, really noticed you, you're in its story now. Only way out is through. Through what? but the ranger was walking away, disappearing into the fog. I called after him, but my voice seemed to die just feet from my mouth. The fog swallowed sound the way darkness swallows light. I was alone. Alone with 4 dead presidents and something else. Something that had been waiting in the stone for God knows how long. That's when I heard it. A sound like breathing, but not quite. More like wind through caves, but not quite that either. It was coming from the mountain. The whole mountain was inhaling. And with each breath the fog pulsed, thickened, reached out like fingers. I raised my camera again. Don't ask me why. Maybe because looking through a viewfinder made it feel less real, more manageable. Like I could control what I was seeing by framing it. Click, click, click. With each photo, the 5th face became clearer in my viewfinder. Not on the LCD screen. Those images stayed normal, but in the viewfinder itself. Like the camera was translating something my eyes couldn't quite process. The face was definitely ancient. Pre-human, maybe. The features were wrong in subtle ways. Eyes too far apart, mouth too wide, expression too knowing. But it was also familiar. Like a face from a dream you can't quite remember. A face that knew your name before you were born. Then I realized something that made my blood turn to ice water. In each photo, in each frame, the face was getting closer. Not physically. The mountain wasn't moving, but the perspective was shifting. Like I was being pulled toward it, or it toward me. The distance between us was collapsing, folding in on itself like origami made of space. I lowered the camera, and the world lurched. I was no longer standing in the viewing area. I was on the mountain, on the actual mountain, standing on a narrow ledge between Roosevelt's ear and Lincoln's nose. The fog was everywhere, so thick I couldn't see more than a few feet. But I could feel the presence of that 5th face. It was close. So close. You see me. The voice didn't come from anywhere. It just was. In my head, in my bones, in the spaces between my thoughts. I see you, I whispered back. What else could I say? Good. It's been so long since anyone truly saw. They carve their heroes in my skin, tell their stories on my bones, but they don't see what was already here. What will always be here. The fog parted slightly and I saw, not the face, but its eye. One massive eye, carved not from stone but from something older. The iris was the color of time itself, if time had a color. Brown and gold and silver and colors that don't have names because humans never needed to name them. What do you want? I asked. To be remembered. To be acknowledged. To have my story told alongside theirs. The eye blinked, slowly, and in that blink I saw everything. The mountain before it was a mountain. The world before it was the world. Things that crawled and flew and sang before humans dreamed of crawling or flying or singing. I don't know how to tell that story. You already are. Every photo you take, every word you speak, every breath in this fog, you're telling it. You've been chosen as witness, as chronicler, as the one who bridges the gap between what was and what is. The eye closed, and suddenly I was back in the viewing area. My camera was in my hands. My car was in the parking lot and the fog was lifting. Dawn was breaking over the black hills, painting everything gold and pink and normal. But I knew nothing would ever be normal again. I didn't tell anyone what happened. How could I? Hey, so the mountain talked to me through a secret 5th face that only appears in magic fog. Sure, that would go over well. But the photos were different. Back at the hotel, I uploaded them to my laptop. At first, they looked normal, just atmospheric shots of Mount Rushmore in fog. Exactly what Hendrix had asked for. But the longer I stared at them, the more I noticed inconsistencies. In one photo, Washington's eyes were definitely closed. I know they're carved open, but in this image they were closed. In another, Jefferson seemed to be looking directly at the camera, not into the middle distance like he's supposed to. And in the spaces between the faces, in the rough granite that was never carved, there were patterns. Shapes that almost formed a face if you looked at them just right. I separated those photos into a different folder. The weird ones. The ones that showed things that shouldn't be there. As I dragged the last file over, my laptop screen flickered. For just a second, less than a second, all 4 presidential faces on my screen turned to look at the 5th face, the one that was definitely there now, clear as day in the digital image. My phone rang. Hendricks. How are the photos coming along? His voice was different than before, eager, hungry almost. Got some good shots. The fog came in perfect this morning. The early fog? I hesitated. How did you know about that? Did you see it? He ignored my question. Did you capture it? Capture what exactly? There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing, quick and shallow. The 5th face. The original face. Did you photograph it? Mr. Hendricks, what's really going on here? What is this job actually about? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. My family has been searching for proof for 3 generations. My great-grandfather was part of Borglum's crew. He saw it once during the carving. Swore the mountain already had a face older than anything. But no one believed him. Died in an asylum, convinced he was being watched by stone eyes. And you want proof he wasn't crazy? I want proof of what's really there. What's always been there. The Historical Society. We're not interested in history, Mr. Coleman. We're interested in truth. In the things that existed before history. Before humans decided what was real and what wasn't. I looked at my laptop screen. The 5th face stared back at me from between the presidents. What happens if I give you these photos? Then the world knows. Then we can't ignore it anymore. Then things change. Change how? That depends on what it wants. On what it's been waiting for all these centuries. I thought about that massive eye, older than time. About the voice that spoke without speaking. About being chosen as witness. I need to think about this. Don't think too long. The early fog doesn't come often, and once it's shown itself to you, well, you're part of the story now, whether you want to be or not. He hung up. I spent the rest of the day editing photos, the normal ones, the safe ones, the ones that showed exactly what people expected to see. 4 presidents. Nothing more. But I kept going back to that other folder, the true ones, the ones where reality had slipped just enough to show what was underneath. That evening, Denny found me at the bar again. He looked worse than before, haggard. His maintenance uniform was rumpled, stained with something that might have been motor oil but looked darker. You saw it? Again, not a question. I nodded. Jesus. He ordered whiskey this time, neat. I've worked there 15 years. Seen the early fog maybe a dozen times. Never once did it notice me. But you, one time, and it talked to you, didn't it? How do you know? You got that look. Same look my predecessor had before he quit. Moved to Arizona, far as he could get from mountains. He knocked back his whiskey. What did it say? I told him. Not everything, but enough. He listened without interrupting, occasionally signaling for another drink. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. There are stories, he finally said. Old stories. Lakota, mostly, but others too, about what these hills were before they were hills, about the first inhabitants. Not human, not animal, something else. They say one of them got trapped when the world changed, locked in stone, waiting. Waiting for what? for someone to set it free, or maybe just to acknowledge it exists, to stop pretending the world began with us. He stood, swaying slightly. Be careful what you do with those photos. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed. Yeah, I've heard. No. He gripped my shoulder hard. Some doors were closed for a reason. And opening them doesn't just change the world. It changes everything that ever was. That night, I couldn't sleep again. The heater clicked its nervous rhythm. The fog rolled past my window, unusually thick for this time of night. And in my laptop, in that folder of impossible photos, something was happening. The images were changing. Not dramatically, subtly. In one, the fifth face's mouth was slightly more open. In another, its eyes had shifted, looking at something outside the frame. And in the last photo I'd taken, the one just as I'd been transported back to the viewing area, there was something new. A hand. Partially visible, emerging from the stone beside the face. Not carved, not shaped by tools, but pushing through, like the granite was just a thin shell covering something much larger. I slammed the laptop shut, but I could still feel it. That presence, that attention. It knew where I was. It knew I had the proof, and it was waiting to see what I would do with it. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Just coordinates, nothing else. I plugged them into my GPS. They led to a spot on the mountain I'd never been. An old service road abandoned for decades. Another buzz, another text. The early fog is coming. 3 a.m. Bring the photos. It's time to finish the story. I looked at the clock. 1:47 a.m. I had just over an hour to decide. Give Hendrix the photos and let the world know what's really in Mount Rushmore. Or delete everything and pretend none of this happened. But I already knew I couldn't pretend. Once you've seen the face in the stone, once it's seen you, you're part of something bigger, something older. Something that's been waiting so long to be acknowledged that waiting has become its entire existence. I grabbed my camera, my laptop, and my car keys. Whatever was going to happen, it was going to happen tonight. The service road was worse than abandoned. It was deliberately forgotten. My Honda's headlights caught the rusted remains of a chain that had once blocked the entrance, and beyond that, nature had started reclaiming the asphalt. Trees pressed in from both sides, their branches scraping against my windows like fingernails. According to my GPS, I was heading to the backside of Mount Rushmore. The side tourists never see. The side where Borglum had originally planned to carve the full bodies of the presidents before funding ran out. Or, that was the official story. The road ended at a small clearing. 3 cars were already there. Hendrix's black Lincoln. The Ranger's Park Service vehicle. And, surprisingly, Denny's beat-up Ford. They were standing near the tree line, waiting. Behind them, the mountain loomed, and even from this angle, even without the carved faces visible, I could feel that presence, that ancient attention focused on our little gathering. "You came," Hendrix said. He looked different in the darkness. Older. More desperate. "Do you have them?" "The photos?" I held up my laptop bag. "First, I want the truth. All of it." The Ranger laughed bitterly. "The truth? The truth is that we've all been cursed by knowing, by seeing, and the only way to break the curse is to make everyone see." "It's not a curse," Denny said quietly. "It's an invitation." The fog was starting to form, not rolling in, but manifesting, breathing into existence around us. In the distance, I could hear that sound again, the mountain inhaling. "The Lakota were right," Hendrix began, his eyes never leaving the mountain. This was sacred ground. But not because of what they believed. It was sacred because something was imprisoned here. Something that predated their ancestors, predated humanity itself. When Borglum came with his dynamite and his vision, he didn't know what he was carving into, but he found out, the ranger continued. During the carving, workers reported seeing things. Faces in the stone that weren't supposed to be there. Chambers that opened onto impossible spaces. Most were dismissed as hallucinations from the dynamite fumes. But Borglum knew. He saw it too. The fifth face. He tried to incorporate it, Denny added. Tried to make it part of the monument. But it wouldn't let him. It had its own plans. So Borglum did the only thing he could. He carved around it, hid it between the presidents, made it invisible unless you knew how to look. Or unless it wanted to be seen, I'd said. They all turned to me. That's the part you're missing, I continued, understanding flooding through me. It's not imprisoned. It's not trapped. It's waiting, and it chose to reveal itself, to me, to all of us. The question is why. The fog thickened. Through it, I could see the mountain changing. Not physically, but dimensionally. Like reality was becoming negotiable. The back of Mount Rushmore, the uncarved section, was rippling. Stone became fluid, fluid became form, and that form. The fifth face pushed through. Not just the face this time, but shoulders, chest, arms. It was emerging from the mountain like someone climbing out of a pool. But this was no human figure. It was vast, impossible, beautiful in the way cosmic things are beautiful. Too large for the human mind to fully comprehend. My witnesses, it spoke, and we all heard it, not in our ears but in our bones. My chroniclers, my bridge between what was and what will be. What are you? Hendricks asked, his voice trembling with awe and terror. I am the memory of when the world was young. The last of the first. The keeper of stories that predate your words for stories. The figure was fully emerged now, standing impossible tall against the sky made of stone and fog and starlight. Your kind carved your heroes into my sleeping body. 4 faces to tell your version of history, but history is just a heartbeat in the life of the world. I am the history before history, and I have been waiting so long to tell it. Tell it to who? I asked. The fifth face turned to me, and I saw in its ancient features something almost like kindness. To you. To them. To anyone who will listen. Your world has forgotten that it stands on the bones of older worlds. You've forgotten the songs that shaped the mountains, the words that carved the valleys. But I remember. And through your little capturing device, it gestured at my camera, I can remind. The photos, Hendricks breathed. They're not just proof. They're messages, stories, memories, truths your kind has forgotten how to see. The figure began to fade back into the mountain, but its presence remained. Share them, or don't. The choice is yours. But know this. I have been seen. I have been acknowledged, and that's all I needed. The rest is up to you. The fog swirled, thickened, and when it cleared, we were alone. 4 humans standing in a clearing, staring at a mountain that looked exactly as it always had. Except now we knew better. I opened my laptop. The photos were all there, but they'd changed again. Each one now showed not just the fifth face, but hints of the world it remembered. Impossible cities in the backgrounds, creatures that never made it into fossil records, skies with too many moons. What do we do? The ranger asked. I looked at each of them. Hendricks, desperate for vindication. The ranger, burdened by knowledge. Denny, strangely at peace. We decide. Do we share these and change everything? Or do we keep the secret and let the world keep spinning as it is? It's not our secret to keep, Denny said. It never was. He was right. The fifth face had chosen to reveal itself, had chosen us as witnesses. Who were we to hide that truth? But as I looked at those impossible photos, I wondered, was the world ready? Were people prepared to know that everything they believed about history, about reality, about humanity's place in the universe, was just one chapter in a much larger, much stranger story? We share them, Hendricks said firmly. The truth deserves to be known. Slowly, the ranger countered. Carefully. Too much truth too fast. Breaks people, I finished. Yeah, I know. That was 3 months ago. I've shared some of the photos, the subtle ones, the ones that just show a hint of something wrong with Mount Rushmore. They've gone viral, of course. People love a mystery. Conspiracy theorists have had a field day. Most think they're photoshopped. But some people see it. Really see it. They message me describing dreams of ancient faces in stone, of worlds before the world. They've been chosen too, I think. Witnesses to a truth too large for any one person to hold. Hendricks published a paper about anomalies in the Mount Rushmore formation. The academic world laughed him off. But the paper is out there, waiting for the right eyes to find it. The ranger still works at the monument. He says the early fog comes more often now, almost like the mountain is eager to be seen now that it knows people are finally looking. Denny disappeared last month, left a note saying he was going to learn the old songs. I think I know what he meant. Sometimes, late at night, I hear them too. Melodies that predate music, rhythms that shaped the world. As for me, I'm in Florida now, as far from mountains as I can get. But distance doesn't matter. Not really. Because once you've seen the fifth face, once you've been chosen as a witness, you carry that knowledge forever. It changes you, makes you see the hidden faces in everything, the stories behind the stories, the truth beneath the truth. I still have all the photos, the real ones, the ones that show everything. Sometimes I think about releasing them all at once, just dumping them on the internet and letting chaos reign. But then I remember that ancient eye, looking at me with something like trust. It waited so long to be seen. It can wait a little longer to be understood. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night, the thing that made me tell you this story. I've started seeing other faces, not just in Mount Rushmore, but in other mountains, other monuments, other stones that we've carved and claimed and called our own. They're all waking up, all ready to tell their stories. And I don't think we have enough witnesses. So I'm asking you, next time you see fog rolling in somewhere it shouldn't be, next time you notice something wrong in a photo, next time you feel like you're being watched by something older than old, don't look away. Don't dismiss it. Don't pretend it's not there. Because it's been there all along, waiting, watching, hoping someone would finally see. The fifth face of Mount Rushmore is real. I have the photos to prove it. But more importantly, I have the memory of that ancient eye, looking at me across impossible distances, saying without words, "You see me. I see you." And now, everything changes. Some of you will think I'm crazy. That's fine. Most witnesses are called crazy at first, but some of you already know I'm telling the truth. You've felt it too. That presence in the stone, that awareness in the mountain, that face that shouldn't be there but always was. To those people I say this: you're not alone. We're not alone. We never were. The mountains remember everything, and now they're ready to remind us. Sweet dreams, if you can still manage them after hearing this. And remember, next time you visit Mount Rushmore, or any mountain, or any place where stone meets sky, look closer. Look for the faces that were there first. The ones we've been trying not to see. They're waiting for you to notice them. They've been waiting such a long, long time. Story number 4. My grandmother's hands trembled as she passed me the shoebox, weathered and tied with string that had yellowed with age. "You want to know about Centralia?" she whispered. "The real reason we left?" She glanced at the window, as if someone might be listening. The fire was just their excuse. What we found down there. Her voice trailed off, and for the first time in my 32 years, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "Before I tell you what was in that box, before I explain why my family never speaks about our time in Centralia, I need you to understand something. The official story, the one about the underground coal fire that's been burning since 1962, that's true, but it's not the whole truth, not even close. And now, the story begins." I drove into Centralia on a Tuesday morning in October. My GPS kept trying to reroute me away from the town. "No roads available," it insisted, even though I could clearly see Route 61 stretching ahead. The fog was thick that morning, unusual for that time of year, and it smelled wrong. Not like smoke from the underground fire everyone knows about. It smelled sweet, like overripe fruit left in the sun. My name is Marcus Wheeler, and I'd spent 3 months convincing my editor at the Philadelphia Tribune to let me write this piece. "Another Centralia story?" he'd said, rolling his eyes. "What's left to tell?" But I had something no other journalist had, my grandmother's shoebox, and the names of 3 families who'd left Centralia the same week in 1983. Not because of the fire, because of what the fire uncovered. The town looked exactly like the photos you've seen online. Abandoned houses with their windows dark, streets cracked with vegetation pushing through, graffiti highway where teenagers come to spray paint messages. What the photos don't show you is how quiet it is. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind of silence that makes your ears ring, like the town is holding its breath. I parked near what used to be the municipal building. Now just a foundation and some scattered bricks. The fog was getting thicker, and I noticed something odd. My phone had no signal. Not weak signal, no signal. The screen kept flickering, showing the time as 11:17 a.m., then 2:43 p.m., then back to 11:17 a.m. That's when I heard it. Singing, children's voices, coming from somewhere beneath the cracked pavement. "Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies." But the words were wrong somehow. The melody just slightly off key, like a music box that's been wound too many times. I followed the sound, my feet crunching on the gravel, until I reached the old church cemetery. Most of the headstones had been moved years ago, but a few remained, tilted at odd angles like broken teeth. The singing was louder here, definitely coming from underground, and I could feel warmth through the soles of my shoes, not from the coal fire. This was different, pulsing, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. My grandmother's first letter was dated March 15th, 1983. "The children have been acting strange," she'd written to her sister in Pittsburgh. "They stand at their bedroom windows at night, all of them, every child on Locust Avenue, just staring at something we can't see. When we ask what they're looking at, they smile and say the pretty lights in the ground." I knelt down, pressing my palm against the warm earth, and that's when I saw it. A crack in the ground. No wider than a quarter, but deep. So deep that when I shined my phone's flashlight into it, the light just disappeared. And from that darkness, I swear I saw something looking back. Not eyes exactly, but the impression of eyes. Dozens of them. The singing stopped. I spent that first night in a motel 30 miles away. But I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those shapes in the crack, moving, shifting, waiting. My phone had started working again once I left Centralia, but the photos I'd taken were corrupted. All except one. A picture of the cemetery that showed strange lights beneath the ground. Lights that definitely weren't there when I took the photo. The next morning, I drove to Ashland to meet Tommy Brennan. He'd been 8 years old when his family fled Centralia, and he was one of the few willing to talk about it. We met at a diner, one of those places with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tastes like it's been sitting since 1975. You ever have a dream that feels more real than being awake? Tommy asked, stirring sugar into his coffee. He was 50 now, gray-haired and tired-looking, but his hands shook like my grandmother's had. That's what Centralia felt like those last weeks. Like we were all sharing the same dream, or nightmare. He told me about the night of March 22nd, 1983. Every child in town, 23 of them, had walked out of their houses at exactly 2:17 a.m. Their parents found them in the cemetery, standing in a perfect circle around a spot where the ground had collapsed, revealing a hole that went down and down and down. We were humming, Tommy said, his voice barely a whisper. All of us, the same tune, but none of us remembered learning it. And in that hole, God help me, there were things moving. Not animals, not people, just movements. Like the darkness itself was alive. The parents pulled the children away, but the damage was done. The kids wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. They'd draw pictures, always the same picture, of tall figures made of shadow standing in their bedrooms, watching them. Tommy pulled out his phone, showed me a photo of one of his childhood drawings. The crayon figures were crude but disturbing, elongated shapes with too many joints, heads that split open like flowers, revealing more darkness inside. The fire spread underground that week, Tommy continued, but here's what nobody talks about. It spread in perfect lines, straight lines, like it was following something, like it was searching. Tommy reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder, the edges brown with age. I've been collecting these for years, he said, spreading out photocopied maps on the diner table. Fire department records, geological surveys, EPA reports. Look at this. The maps showed the underground fire's progression from 1962 to 1983. At first glance, it looked random, chaotic, but Tommy had overlaid them with tracing paper, connecting the paths with red ink. The pattern that emerged made my blood run cold. It's a spiral, I breathed. Not just any spiral. It's mathematical, perfect, like something was guiding it. Tommy's finger traced the red lines. And look where all the paths converge. The center point was directly beneath Centralia Elementary School. There's more, Tommy said, pulling out another folder. This one contained newspaper clippings from towns across Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia. Small articles buried in back pages. Child disappearances. Families that moved away suddenly in the middle of the night. Always preceded by reports of strange lights and children acting differently. It's spreading, Tommy whispered. Whatever happened in Centralia, it didn't stay contained. These dates, they match up with when kids from our town moved to these places. We scattered all over after '83, and everywhere we went. He didn't need to finish the sentence. I could see it in the pattern. A slow infection spreading outward, carried by the children who had been changed. That's not the worst part, Tommy said, his voice dropping even lower. 3 weeks ago, my granddaughter Emma started drawing pictures. She's 5, lives in Pittsburgh with my daughter. Never heard of Centralia, never met any of the other kids from back then. He slid a crayon drawing across the table. A crude but unmistakable image of tall shadow figures standing around a hole in the ground. At the bottom, in a child's shaky handwriting, the words, "Almost time to go home." She drew this after visiting the Carnegie Science Center. They have a geology exhibit, including a display about the Centralia fire. Emma stood in front of it for 2 hours, just staring, When they finally pulled her away, she was humming that same tune. That goddamn tune I heard 40 years ago. I drove back to Centralia that afternoon, armed with better equipment. A professional camera, EMF detector, digital recorder. The fog was back, thicker than before. And this time I noticed something else. Footprints in the ash and dust. Fresh ones, small ones, child-sized. The abandoned school was my next stop, Centralia Elementary. Closed since 1982. Its windows boarded up, playground equipment rusted and twisted. But the front door was open, not forced open, just open, like someone had unlocked it from the inside. The hallways still had children's artwork on the walls, faded and water-damaged but visible. Normal kid stuff mostly, houses with smiling suns, stick-figure families. But then I reached the third-grade classroom. Every single drawing, dozens of them, showed the same thing. Children holding hands with tall shadow figures to walking into holes in the ground, and at the bottom of each picture, the same phrase written in different childish handwriting. "They're taking us home." That's when I heard it again. The singing, but this time it was coming from the basement. The basement door shouldn't have been there. I'd studied the school's original blueprints, and Centralia Elementary never had a basement. The coal seams ran too close to the surface, making underground construction impossible. Yet there it was, a door marked storage that opened to stairs leading down into absolute darkness. My flashlight beam seemed to get swallowed by the black, but I descended anyway. The temperature rose with each step, not uncomfortably hot, but warm like skin. The walls were smooth, too smooth, like they'd been melted and reformed, and they were humming, a low vibration that I felt in my teeth. The stairs ended in a room that couldn't exist. It was too big, extending far beyond the school's foundation. The floor was covered in toys, hundreds of them, dolls and trucks and blocks, all from the early 1980s, all arranged in perfect circles. In the center of each circle was a hole, about the size of a fist, and from each hole came a soft light. Not fire. Something else. Something that moved like liquid. I found the records then, stacked neatly on what used to be a teacher's desk. Attendance sheets from March 1983, but the names were wrong. Next to each child's name was another name, written in a language I couldn't read, symbols that hurt to look at. And at the bottom of each page, the same note. Transfer complete. Behind the desk, I discovered something that shouldn't have been there. Filing cabinets. Dozens of them. Stretching back into the darkness. Each one labeled with dates, but not just from 1983. The labels went back decades. 1962, 1951, 1943, and forward to 1995, 2003, 2017, 2024. I opened the nearest cabinet, my hands shaking. Inside were medical records, psychological evaluations, all for children, hundreds of them. The earliest files were handwritten, faded ink on yellowed paper. As I flipped through them, a pattern emerged. Subject exhibits unusual behavior following exposure to subsurface phenomena, read one report from 1962. Child demonstrates advanced cognitive abilities, particularly in mathematical reasoning and pattern recognition. However, parents report personality changes. Subject no longer responds to birth name, claims to be someone else living in the warm place below. Another file from 1971. Subject number 47 successfully integrated into host community of Wilkes Barre. Has begun identifying additional candidates among local children. Recommend continued monitoring. The files weren't just records, they were progress reports. Someone, or something, had been documenting a systematic process of recruitment, replacement, I couldn't tell which, but the scope was staggering. Children from dozens of towns across Pennsylvania and beyond, all exhibiting the same changes, all becoming something else. The most recent files made my blood freeze. 2023, 2024. Children from Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Cleveland, all with the same symptoms, all drawing the same pictures, all humming the same tune. And then I found my own file. Subject number 1247, Marcus Wheeler, age 32, journalist, Philadelphia Tribune, grandson of Margaret Wheeler. Subject number 23, 1983 cohort. High probability of susceptibility due to genetic markers. Initial exposure, October 15, 2024. Expected completion of integration, January 2025. Below that, in handwriting I didn't recognize but somehow felt familiar. Someone had added, "Subject has returned voluntarily. Accelerating timeline." My grandmother's second letter was clearer. Helen Morrison says her daughter isn't her daughter anymore. Same face, same voice, but something behind the eyes is different. Like someone else is looking out. The priest won't come to the house anymore. Says the children smell wrong. Like sulfur and sweet rot, I photographed everything. My hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the camera steady. That's when I noticed the wall. It was covered in photographs. Class photos from Centralia Elementary going back decades. But in the photos from 1983 onward, the children's eyes were wrong. They reflected light like a cat's eyes. And if you looked closely, really closely, you could see shapes in those reflections. Tall shapes, waiting. But it wasn't just the photos from 1983. As I looked closer, I realized some of the earlier photos showed the same thing. Children with those same reflecting eyes scattered throughout class photos from the 1960s, the 1950s, even the 1940s. Whatever had been happening in Centralia, it had been going on for a very long time. At the far end of the room, behind the filing cabinets, I found another staircase. This one led even deeper, carved not into earth but into solid rock. The walls were covered in symbols, not carved but somehow burned into the stone. They seemed to move in my peripheral vision, rearranging themselves when I wasn't looking directly at them. The singing was getting louder, and now I could understand the words. They weren't in English, weren't in any language that should exist, but somehow I knew what they meant. The door is open. The path is clear. We're going home. We're going home. The stairs ended in a vast cavern that defied all logic. It stretched beyond the reach of my flashlight, and the ceiling was lost in darkness above. But it wasn't empty. The cavern was filled with structures, buildings that grew from the rock like coral formations. And everywhere, lights. The same liquid light I'd seen in the holes above, but here it flowed like rivers through channels carved in the floor. In the center of it all stood something that made my mind recoil. A tower, or maybe a tree. It was impossible to tell. It pulsed with that inner light, and from its base, passages led off in every direction. I counted 12 of them, each one perfectly straight. Each one leading toward a different part of Pennsylvania. This wasn't just about Centralia, this was a hub, a central nervous system with tendrils reaching out to every corner of the state. And at the base of the tower, children played. Hundreds of them. From different eras, different decades. Some wore clothes from the 1940s, others from the 1980s. Some were dressed in modern clothes I recognized from recent missing person reports. They all looked up at me when I entered, smiled the same smile, and sang in perfect harmony, "Welcome home, Marcus. We've been waiting for you." I ran, up the stairs, through the basement room, past the filing cabinets and the photographs. But the town had changed. The abandoned houses weren't empty anymore. In every window, children stood watching. Not real children, not anymore. Their eyes glowed with that liquid light, and they were all smiling the same smile. My car wouldn't start. The engine turned over, but the sound was wrong, like something was inside it, breathing. I abandoned it and ran toward Route 61, but the fog was so thick now I could barely see 3 feet ahead. And behind me, getting closer, footsteps, dozens of them. Small feet running in perfect synchronization. That's when I remembered the third letter, the one my grandmother had never sent. They want the adults now. The children were just the beginning. They needed young minds, flexible, adaptable, to prepare the way. But now they're ready for the rest of us. The fire isn't driving us out. It's hurting us. Toward the deep places, toward them. I made it out of Centralia, but I'm not sure how. One moment I was running through the fog. The next, I was sitting in my car on Route 61, 5 miles from town. The sun was setting, but according to my phone, only an hour had passed since I'd entered the school. The photos I'd taken were all corrupted except for 3. 3 images that I've never shown anyone because I'm not sure what they'd do to the people who saw them. The first shows the basement room, but it's full of children, modern children, kids wearing clothes from 2024, 2023, 2022. Their faces are blurred, but you can see they're all looking at something off camera. The second photo is of the wall of class pictures, but now there are new ones, dated 2025, 2026, 2027. Schools I've never heard of, towns that don't exist yet. The third photo is the one that keeps me awake at night. It's a selfie I don't remember taking. I'm smiling, standing in that basement room, and behind me, tall figures made of shadow and light. But here's the thing. Look at my eyes in that photo. Really look. They're reflecting something. And if you zoom in, enhance it just right, you can see what I was looking at. It's a city, underground, vast and impossible and beautiful in a way that makes your mind hurt. Streets that spiral into themselves, buildings that grow like living things, and everywhere, children playing. Hundreds of them, thousands, all with those glowing eyes, all singing that same song. I contacted the 3 families my grandmother had mentioned. The Brennans, the Morettis, the Kowalskis. They all told the same story. Their children had changed in March 1983. Became something else. Something that looked like their kids, sounded like their kids, but wasn't. And then came the night when the children tried to take them underground, to the city, to the things that had been waiting beneath Centralia since long before the fire started. But there was more. Each family had kept records, detailed accounts of what happened to their children, and what happened after they left Centralia. The children grew up, had children of their own, and those grandchildren, they were all having the same dreams, drawing the same pictures, humming the same tune. It's generational, Maria Moretti told me over the phone, her voice tight with decades of suppressed fear. Whatever they did to our kids, it's in their DNA now, being passed down. My grandson lives in California, never been to Pennsylvania in his life, but last month he asked me about the singing people who live in the ground. He's 4 years old. How does he know about that? The Kowalski family had kept detailed genealogies. They'd tracked down other families who'd left Centralia in the early 1980s, mapped out their descendants. The pattern was undeniable. Children across the country, all connected to Centralia, all exhibiting the same behaviors, all being drawn back. "They're activating," Janet Kowalski whispered. "That's the only word for it. Like sleeper cells waking up after 40 years. My daughter called last week, said her kids had been sleepwalking. Found them in the basement at 2:17 a.m., standing in a circle, humming. They told her they were practicing for the trip home. The fire, you see, wasn't an accident. It was a beacon, a signal, a way to empty the town slowly, carefully, so that what was underneath could finally emerge. The government knows. Why do you think they've let it burn for over 60 years? Why do you think they bought out the houses but never extinguished the fire? They're containing it. Not the fire, what the fire is hiding. But containment is failing. The children who left Centralia in 1983, they're adults now. They're all over Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York, and they remember. They remember the song. They remember the way home. And sometimes, late at night, they gather. In basements, in abandoned buildings, in places where the ground is warm and the walls hum with that familiar vibration. I spent weeks following the trail. Every family that had left Centralia, every child who had been changed. The network was vast, spanning generations, reaching into every major city on the East Coast. They'd been preparing for something, building towards something. In Philadelphia, I found a group that met in the basement of an abandoned church. 30 adults, all former Centralia residents or their descendants, standing in a circle at exactly 2:17 a.m. They were singing the same song, the same tune I'd heard under the school. When they saw me, they smiled. "Marcus," said a woman who looked familiar, though I couldn't place her face. "We've been expecting you. Your file said you'd find us eventually." They knew about the files, about the records, about everything I'd discovered. Because they weren't just victims of whatever was happening in Centralia. They were part of it. Willing participants in something much larger than I'd imagined. "The convergence is almost complete," the woman continued. 40 years of preparation, 40 years of seeding. Soon, very soon, we'll have enough to open the way permanently. No more hiding underground. No more pretending to be human. In Boston, I found another group, larger. They'd taken over an entire office building, the lobby filled with children's drawings of that underground city. The elevators didn't go to offices anymore. They went down, deep down, to meeting rooms where hundreds of people, all with those same reflecting eyes, planned something they called the return. In Cleveland, in Detroit, in Pittsburgh, the same thing. Networks of families, all connected to Centralia, all preparing for the same event, and they all knew I was coming, expected me, welcomed me. Because, according to them, I wasn't investigating this story, I was part of it, had always been part of it. The moment I stepped foot in Centralia, the moment I heard that first note of the song, I'd been claimed, marked, changed. They're preparing for something. The real evacuation, not just of Centralia, but of everywhere above, because the city below is growing, has been growing for 40 years, and it needs more residents, more families, more children to stand at windows and stare at lights that shouldn't exist. I know because, and this is the part I've never told anyone, I've been back to Centralia 3 times since that day, not because I want to, because I have to. Because every night at 2:17 a.m., I hear the singing, feel the warmth beneath my feet no matter where I am. And in my dreams, I'm walking down those stairs again, into the basement, into the room with the circles, and the children are there, waiting, smiling, holding out their hands. "Come home," they say. "We've been waiting for you." My grandmother died last month. In her final moments, she grabbed my hand and pulled me close. "Don't let them take you," she whispered. "The fire isn't why we left. We left because some of us wanted to stay, wanted to go with them, and every day, that want gets stronger." She was right. It does get stronger. Every day, I think about that underground city, about how beautiful it was, how perfect, how much better than the world above, and I wonder, would it really be so bad? To let go? To follow the children down into the warm darkness? To finally go home? If you're ever driving through Pennsylvania, and you see the smoke rising from Centralia, don't stop. Don't investigate. Don't listen to the stories about the coal fire, because the fire isn't the danger. The fire is just the guardian, keeping the curious away, protecting us from what's underneath, or maybe protecting what's underneath from us. I'm not sure anymore, but I am sure of one thing. They're still down there, still waiting, still singing. And one day, when enough children have gathered, when enough families have heard the song, the fire will go out, the ground will open, and we'll all go home, whether we want to or not. Listen, before you go, before you close this video and move on with your day, I need you to do something for me. Check on your children tonight. Watch them at their windows. See what they're looking at. And if they mention lights in the ground, or if they start humming a song you've never heard before, a song that sounds like a music box wound too many times, move, leave. Don't pack. Don't hesitate. Just go. Because once they've seen the lights, once they've heard the song, it's already too late. They belong to the city now, the city beneath, the city that's been waiting, and if you've made it this far, if you've listened to this whole story, then you've heard the song too. It's in the background, hidden in the static, woven into my words. You might not realize it yet, but tonight, at 2:17 a.m., you'll wake up, and you'll hear it clearly. The children singing, calling you home. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. But I had to share it, had to pass it on, because that's how it spreads. Story by story, dream by dream, until we're all singing the same song, until we all go home. Sweet dreams.